Greetings, ladies and mental gents, and welcome to my channel, where I like to make audio narrations of various stories from the internet. In this video, we'll be focusing on a story from the subreddit HFY, called Those Who Remember, written by Regal Legal. The link to the original will be down below, and, as always, I hope that you enjoy. He looked out through the diner window, and the rain beating against the storm beyond had whipped the bay into a teeming mass of waves and white crests. Slowly he rubbed a hand along his jaw. His beard had once been a rich auburn, now simply white. Then he looked back at the fresh-faced young man who asked him the question. He was wearing one of those new fancy suits, some sort of synthetic fibers, the latest rage. Those young eyes didn't know what kind of hardships and pain he'd been through. Did they know anything but peace and prosperity? It seemed impossible that within his life there was a generation that didn't know war and strife. How far back would you like me to go? He finally asked the young man. As far back as you're willing to go. He slid a hollow recorder across the table to make sure that the conversation was captured in full detail. The old man wondered if that meant that the storm outside was going to be on it as well. Slowly, he sighed out and took a sip of the dark black coffee that he'd ordered. We came from a place known as the Midwest. Back on Earth, the area known locally as America. You probably know more about that place than I did if you paid attention in history. I never went to a real school or nothing. My mother's mother taught me reading and writing and basic numbers. My dad taught me how to maintain and clean my gun, how to shoot and fight. We did plenty of that. After the last round of wars, after our ancestors left, things were bad. We had scavenged some old military trucks, our clan, so we'd drive them around, following the game, living off the land and the fruits and veggies that we could scrounge up. He thought back to his childhood back on Earth, scratching the side of his nose idly while he thought. There were about 500 of us in my clan. My dad was important, chief mechanic. Kept everything running. That was big. If you couldn't keep ahead of the storms, you weren't going to survive. Well, storms and raiders. Raiders? Oh yeah. For those clans like mine that were content to survive and scrounge, there were also those who wanted more. Or perhaps they wanted what we wanted, but they just thought that it was easier just to take what we had. We'd get attacked at least once a week. I was in my first firefight at the age of 14. By 16, I was a scout, had myself an old dune buggy that I fixed up myself. He smiled as he thought back to his buggy. It was a little more than an engine, 4 wheels, and a seat strapped to the frame. But when he was a kid, it was the greatest thing in the world. At least, that world. My father was killed in a raid when I was 18. I had the gift of machinery like him, but they needed me to fight more than to fix for a while. We found the beacon when I was 19. It was an old military base that we scavenged when I found it. I had no idea what the Slavic Federation was, and I couldn't speak Russian, but I could tell that it was old tech. It was something new, something important. I convinced the others to change what we'd been doing, to settle into the base and protect it until I could figure it out. Was it difficult? To convince everyone? No. They saw what I meant when I pointed it out. Someone had sent something shiny and new back to Earth. We knew the old legend. We were ready for some hope. So we set up shop. The raids became more regular, but we now had a solid spot to defend. Turned out that I didn't even need to learn Russian. We'd been there for about a month when the transmission came through. 6 or 7 different languages. English was one of them. Told us to sit tight and how to respond. Were you nervous? Someone from another planet tries to talk to me. Feck, yeah, I was nervous, but I followed the instructions and thankfully they were idiot-proof. I got in touch with the program, answered what I could, and they told us that our clan would be the first. I didn't know what for, but I was too nervous to ask. So we got everything that we had ready for travel. Just like ordered, we patched up our pressure suits and stood around the beacon for hours, just standing there. I started to worry someone was messing with us. The raiders didn't attack. No, thankfully. Then we were somewhere else. You ever used one of those gates? No, I haven't. It's interesting. It's like somehow you know that you went somewhere and you feel like you got squished and rebuilt. But all in an instant. Anyway, there we were suddenly somewhere else. It was gorgeous, too, like the old pictures of my mother's mother would show me. The national parks that they used to call them. It was all green and alive and just gorgeous. I figured that no one would be trying to kill me there. Course, I was wrong. They didn't tell you about the war. Well, from what I understand, when they activated the beacon, the war hadn't started. I mean, it feels like an instant, but it was actually like a week. I'm not a scientist, so I can't be sure. Either way, I finally noticed the soldiers waving us forward. I had an old military rifle at the time. Amongst the clans, it was a highly prized, very advanced compared to the old beat-up milsurp that the others had. The what? Sorry, old term. It's the remains from the last war. Just common rifles that pumped out of millions to arm as many people as possible. Mine was a special forces weapon handed down from my father's mother. And I was also wearing a combat harness pressure suit instead of the civilian models of the others. So, you have to understand, as a 19-year-old at the time, I felt like a real elite soldier. He chuckled and shook his head and then laughing for a moment. What is it? Oh, just how wrong I was. You know everything when you're a teen. Well, the guys waving us forward, shouting in Russian, they had real armor and real guns. Right away I could tell that they could kill us without much effort, and I'm sure that unloading a whole clip into them wouldn't have even fazed them. So that we were standing in paradise, wondering why the soldiers were trying to get us off the platform. Then the African Union attacked. Boom! Explosions all around us. Everyone was screaming, finally moving, running the way that the soldiers were pointing. We heard the trees snapping and the animals we'd never seen flying off into the sky in surprise. These sleek black killer robots all around us. The LEV tanks had backing up, holding them back. Battlesuits brawling with CNDRs. It was chaos. Here we were, a bunch of stupid hicks in the middle of a fight between gods. Were you scared? Of course I was. This wasn't a raider attack. My gun, my prized possession. I saw some of the people in troops apostles. I shot at them, and my bullets just scratched their paint. The centurions waved me off. They weren't exactly winning the battle. So we kept running. Those in trucks driving around the craters and trying not to get shot up too much. Finally, we made it to the Magrail station. A LAV destroyer was parked in front of it. Now, obviously I'd never seen anything like a battlesuits and LAV tanks, but something about that guy. Just the sheer size and power as it sat there, spitting out artillery fire. It was amazing. More so than being transported across the galaxy. Well, like I said, there wasn't much of an experience. It just sort of happened, and I didn't understand it. But the LEV destroyer, it was awe-inspiring. I stood there with the others push me around, and I was just standing there like a slack-jawed local, watching this glorious, magnificent, incredible piece of engineering blow those robots up. But finally one of the soldiers set his hand on my shoulder, pointing to the rest of the clan that was leaving me behind, and said something else in Russian, which I didn't understand. That would have been your wife. Ha! Yes. Course I didn't know it then. In her heavy armor she looked just like any other soldier. What did she say? Oh, she changes her answer depending who's around. But I think the truth is she told me to stop standing there like a target and get my butt moving. The old man grinned as he thought back on that. So I did. I caught up with everyone else, and the other soldiers were waving us onto the mag train. There was just some old ruins and the monorails in the craters of some of the big cities, but I'd never dreamed of seeing something up and running. It was all a lot to take in, but the battle kept us from slowing down. Did you lose anyone? No. The soldiers made sure that we got through okay. I think they felt responsible since they called us from Earth into the war without warning us. We sat in the train watching the land slip past. All that lush green land. Like I said before, it was paradise to us. No dust storms, no derelict dead cities. Lush, green paradise. We saw the small towns and cities we passed by, but it looked just like Earth. Just way nicer. How did you know it wasn't just the sky? I couldn't put my finger on it, but it wasn't quite right. And then, of course, when we passed through those massive chitin paddocks, we approached the Krabrost. Those were not Earth critters. No way, no how. What was your impression of the capital? Well, we didn't stop on that first day. We were trying to get the hell away from the fighting. We just saw it from the mag rail and we went past. We could see it in the distance, massive buildings towering high up into the sky. It was even more beautiful than the pictures that I'd seen of the old cities before everything went to hell. I know now that they'd planned on having a big ceremony at the gate and the event of explaining all of this to us. But the war had started rather suddenly, so they were scrambling to get us to safety. Did you know things weren't going well? I could guess. I mean, everyone was mostly stunned and shocked still at how fast the land was moving beneath us. But I noticed all of the trains heading from where we come. LEV tanks, rows of battlesuits, and predators flying by. Our train was diverted near the city for LEV destroyers to move past. It took up both tracks and the train kept going. On into the night. We huddled up, ate our rations and wondered what was going on. They would say things on the PA, but we didn't know Russian and he didn't know English. So it was poorly planned. Poorly executed. Like I said, I learned about all of their plans afterwards, which sounded good. They just didn't plan on a war, so they couldn't do anything that they'd planned. I mean, considering the war and all of that, they did very well keeping us alive. It took us 2 days to get to Dirt, but we had traveled half the continent in that time. Ah, yes. Dirt. That was your idea for the name. Hell, yes it was. All of the gorgeous forests and lush paradise that we traveled through, and they dropped us off in some barren dirt here at the bay. They had some prefab buildings set up, very sloppy, obviously rushed. That's when I met Grigori, the ambassador of Ark before the war. He spoke English and explained more of what was going on. I'll be honest, until he told us that the robots were of African Union. They'd been human at some point, and I never would have guessed. There were some officials, obviously, and unsure of how to proceed. What happened? He told us this land was ours. They were going to be bringing in more people from Earth, but since we were the first, we'd get to name the city. I asked if we were going to be bringing in other Americans only, or anyone. He told me everyone they could find on Earth was welcome to join us. So I said that we should call it Dirt. They were a little confused and asked what I meant Earth. I said no, I didn't want to name it something that only made sense to Americans, and I figured everyone was willing to fight for their own patch of dirt. So we all agreed to call it Dirt. The officials didn't like it, but Grigori just laughed. He approved. Sure did. What happened next? We started building up Dirt. He waved a hand out through the window. The city is now quite different than it was. Everyone built their own little section. I'm sure you're aware my family owns the docks. How did that come about? We'd never seen the ocean before, let alone go swimming, and we all discovered that we loved it. We had more than our fair share of dust, so we made sure to settle along the waterfront. Everyone found their own little spot. Africans, Europeans, Asians, all of the leftovers who didn't have ancestors lucky enough to leave. They found them where they could and brought them here. A few of us spoke the same language, but we all got along. We had a real home now. We had our own dirt. But it wasn't that easy, was it? No. That first year before the next wave of settlers could be found that we were attacked by ARC. The front had been secured along with the borders was the African Union, but the coast was exposed, and I couldn't believe it. Somehow, it didn't really hit me that ARC was Americans. When the soldiers showed up and they were speaking English, their alien physiology twisted and inhuman, but they spoke English. It was hard to accept. What happened? They attacked the city, people died, buildings were destroyed, but we survived. We'd been attacked before we knew what to do. The army showed up before they could do much more than mess up the town. After that, I demanded to join the military and help. They wouldn't let you. I couldn't believe it, but they first told me that it was their responsibility to fight for us. We'd struggled our whole lives, now they wanted us to live in peace while they struggled for us. I couldn't believe their desire for sacrifice on a national level. Their desire. How? Our desire. I mean, at this point it's obviously more than just a Slavic federation. We still had allies in the Franco-Iberians and the Brazilians. How long did it take to admit it? I had to learn Russian, and then I built a small LEV forklift of my own, without proper tools. That convinced him to let me become an LEV mechanic, and I just kept at it, repairing tanks until I met my wife. Her crew was dead, and we were fighting hard against the Union again. This must have been 5 years into the war. Me and the other mechanics fixed it up, jumped in, and went to war. Didn't stop for the next 20 years. So, you were there for all of it. Sure was. Got married, had some kids, as well as going on. But, yeah, I was there through every major land campaign. I don't want to talk about it too much, just yet, if you won't mind. Please, only what you're comfortable with. The old man looked out of the window. The rain had let up. The storm was dying down. He could see the boats taking advantage of the lull and start hauling their catch. Mostly, it was salmon and tuna. The fisheries had taken hold, and now the planet was teeming with familiar life. The young man spoke up. What made you join? And stay through the whole war? How could I not? I told you I knew almost nothing about any of this world when I found that beacon. Yet they welcomed us with open arms. They took settlers from every corner of the earth that they could. It didn't matter to them. They wanted to give us a new home. Their soldiers died, keeping us alive, even though we couldn't help with the war effort in any meaningful way at the start. They wouldn't allow us to join at first. They were fighting and dying to give us a new home. He shook his head slowly, and then he looked at his coffee. I didn't hate the robots or the harmies. They came to this new world and lost their way. They let it change them into becoming more alien, or more machine, until they forgot being human actually meant. All the Slavic Federation wanted to do was give us a chance to share in the prosperity and tranquility that they had found on this new world. They hadn't understood that the machines and aliens found that threatening. They'd already shed their humanity, whilst those of us who remained pure fought tooth and nail to make this planet a new home for those who'd been left behind. You think they weren't human anymore? They were aliens and machines by the time that I got here. Even if some part of them knew what they used to be, they'd left it behind. But the others, the Slavic Federation, the Brasilia, the Franco-Iberia, they never forgot what they'd left behind. It was us. And when they had a chance to bring us to a new home, they took it. And someday I hope to go back, to turn Earth back into what we knew it can be. That's our burden, but we take it willingly. That's what keeps us pure. And this is when you want to pioneer this expedition back to Earth. There hasn't been any more contact in 20 years, you know, and you're quite advanced in your age at this point. I'm old, kid, you can come out and say it. But why this continuous struggle? Why not let the next generation take up the task? The old man smiled and then ran his hand over the withered and scarred face. There's an old quote that I remember from being a kid. Some old god had made the strong guy carry the world on his shoulders. When the man begged the god, it wasn't to end his burden. He begged for broader shoulders so that he may carry it more easily. Not everyone remembers. Not everyone will carry the burden. But those that do it because we must, not because we're asked. End of story. If you enjoyed this story and wish to support the author, the link is down below. If you would like to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so. They will also be listed in the description down below. But the easiest way to help this channel is to share it, subscribe, and like. And, as always, I will see you all in the next video, and I hope that you have a good one. Cheers!